She isn't lonely because she's alone. She's lonely because she's emotionally unseen. She can be in a relationship, feel cared for, feel chosen, and still feel a quiet emptiness that never leaves. Stay with me till the end, because the last insight explains why being with someone can feel lonelier than being by yourself. She doesn't talk about this loneliness easily, because it feels strange to explain being lonely while someone is right there, so she keeps it to herself. At first, she assumes it's temporary, a phase, a mood. She tells herself relationships aren't supposed to feel deep all the time, that emotional hunger is normal, that maybe she's asking for too much. So she adapts. She listens more than she speaks. She understands more than she is understood. She makes space for others, quietly shrinking her own. Not intentionally, not dramatically, just enough to keep things smooth. But something inside her notices the pattern. Every time she opens up emotionally, she feels slightly more alone afterward. Not because she was rejected, but because she wasn't met. Her feelings were acknowledged, but not entered, heard, but not held. So her nervous system learns something subtle. It becomes safer to feel privately than to feel out loud. And this is where loneliness deepens. She starts processing emotions internally, calming herself, reassuring herself, explaining things to herself. Inside a relationship, from the outside, everything looks stable. She's present, she's loyal, she's there. But internally, she feels like she's carrying her emotional life alone. This kind of loneliness is heavy because it has no obvious cause. Nothing is wrong enough to point at, no conflict big enough to blame, just a quiet absence of emotional resonance. Closeness stops feeling like rest. It starts feeling like effort. She becomes careful with what she shares, not to hide, but to protect herself from the exhaustion of being emotionally exposed without relief. Over time, she notices something painful. She feels more peaceful when she withdraws slightly than when she leans in fully, and that realization scares her because it means the relationship is no longer where her nervous system relaxes. It's where she manages herself. She doesn't leave, not yet, because hope still exists. Hope that one day she'll be understood without explaining, seen without asking, felt without effort. But hope, when stretched too long, turns into quiet fatigue, and that fatigue slowly transforms into emotional distance. She's still there, but she's no longer reaching. The loneliness doesn't become obvious all at once. It spreads quietly, the way fog fills a room without anyone noticing when it started. She begins to realize that the person she's with knows her routine, but not her inner rhythm. They know what she does, but not how she feels while doing it. So she starts editing herself without meaning to. She chooses easier words, shares safer thoughts, keeps the deeper ones tucked away, not because she wants secrecy, but because depth without reception feels like exposure without shelter. There's a moment when she notices something unsettling. When something meaningful happens, her first instinct is no longer to share it. She thinks about it, processes it alone, lets the emotion pass quietly. and only later, if at all, mentions it in a diluted form. That's when loneliness settles deeper, because connection isn't built by proximity. It's built by shared inner experience. When her inner world keeps going unseen, she starts living parts of her life internally, while the relationship continues externally. She becomes emotionally polite, present but measured, warm but contained, affectionate but careful, not cold, just guarded. She learns how to be okay without being fulfilled. This is why loneliness inside a relationship feels confusing. There's no dramatic pain to point at, no betrayal, no obvious absence, just a subtle sense that something essential never arrives. Her body feels it before her mind does, a tightness when she tries to open up, a fatigue after emotional conversations, a relief when she doesn't have to explain herself. Her nervous system is telling her the truth, long before words catch up, and slowly something shifts. She stops hoping that closeness will feel nourishing. She stops expecting emotional refuge, not because she's given up on love, but because she's learned not to rely on it for emotional rest. She becomes self-contained, strong on the surface, independent in appearance, but strength built from necessity often carries a quiet sadness with it, because intimacy was never meant to be survived alone. She doesn't leave immediately. That's not how this kind of loneliness works. She stays. She adapts. She lowers emotional expectations until the relationship feels manageable. And the most painful part is this: she doesn't feel lonely with you. She feels lonely within herself while being with you. That's why reassurance doesn't fix it. Why affection doesn't fully reach. Why promises don't dissolve the distance. Because what she needs isn't more words. It's emotional presence, the kind that feels her without her having to ask. And when that presence is missing for too long, the heart doesn't break loudly. It goes quiet. She doesn't notice the exact moment when the relationship stops feeling like a place she can rest. There's no clear line, no dramatic event. It just happens one quiet adjustment at a time. She learns which emotions are welcome and which ones create distance. So she becomes selective, not dishonest, not manipulative, just careful. Careful with how much she reveals. Careful with how deeply she lets herself feel in front of someone. Careful with expectations she no longer trusts to be met. She still cares. That's the part people miss. Loneliness inside a relationship doesn't come from lack of love. It comes from love that has nowhere to land. So she carries it herself. She becomes the one who understands, the one who adapts, the one who keeps the emotional balance steady. But balance maintained by one person always creates imbalance inside that person. Her inner world keeps growing, changing, deepening, while the emotional space between them stays the same size. And depth needs room. When it doesn't get it, it turns inward. She starts feeling like there are two versions of her life. One that is shared, and one that is quietly private. In the shared version, everything works. In the private one, she feels unseen. This is where loneliness becomes identity level. Not, I feel lonely sometimes, but this is just how I exist now. She tells herself she's fine, that this is adulthood, that emotional hunger is unrealistic. But the body doesn't lie. She feels drained after being together, relieved when she's alone, calmer when no one expects emotional performance from her. And that relief scares her, because it tells her something she doesn't want to admit, that being alone feels less lonely than being emotionally unheld. Still, she doesn't leave, because leaving feels drastic, and staying feels familiar. She convinces herself that this quiet ache is manageable, that it's better than conflict, better than loss, better than uncertainty. But what she doesn't realize yet is this: loneliness doesn't need chaos to erode connection. It only needs time. Time spent being strong when she needed softness. Time spent understanding when she needed to be understood. Time spent holding herself when she needed someone else to hold her emotionally. And slowly, very slowly, her heart stops leaning forward. She doesn't pull away suddenly. She settles back. She stops initiating closeness, stops sharing first, stops bringing her full inner life into the space between them. Not as punishment, not as strategy, but as a form of quiet self-preservation. Because the mind can endure many things, but being emotionally alone while together is one of the hardest. The loneliness keeps deepening, not because anything new is happening, but because nothing changes. Her system begins to recognize a pattern it can no longer ignore. Every time she reaches emotionally, she has to translate herself, explain what she feels, clarify why it matters, defend the depth of it. And depth that needs defending slowly starts to feel unsafe. So she begins to preempt the disappointment. She senses it before it arrives. Before she speaks, she already knows which parts will be misunderstood, which emotions will be minimized, which truths will be brushed past. So she edits herself before the moment even happens. This is where loneliness becomes internalized. She doesn't feel lonely with someone anymore. She feels lonely as herself. Her inner world no longer expects entry from the outside. She carries her thoughts, her fears, her longings quietly, not because she wants secrecy, but because opening the door feels pointless. And here is the part that almost no one talks about. This kind of loneliness creates emotional self-containment. She becomes the place where her own emotions are held. She soothes herself, validates herself, talks herself through moments that once would have been shared. On the surface, this looks like strength, like independence, like emotional maturity. But underneath, it's a form of emotional isolation learned inside closeness. Her nervous system stops associating intimacy with relief. It associates it with effort. So when closeness approaches, her body doesn't soften. It braces, not consciously, not intentionally. It's automatic. Because closeness has not been a place where her emotions rest. It's been a place where they wait. Wait to be understood. Wait to be acknowledged. Wait to be felt. And waiting without arrival creates fatigue. That fatigue doesn't explode. It numbs. She starts to feel slightly disconnected from her own emotions. Not empty, just muted. Things that once excited her now feel distant. Moments that once mattered now feel neutral. Not because she stopped caring, but because caring without resonance exhausted her system. This is when loneliness becomes dangerous. Not dramatic loneliness, not crying loneliness, quiet loneliness, the kind that convinces her this is just how life feels. That deep emotional connection is unrealistic. That wanting to be fully understood is childish. So she lowers the bar internally. She stops asking for emotional presence, stops expecting attunement, stops hoping for depth. And the moment hope leaves, the relationship changes forever, even if it continues. She stays functional, present, responsible, but she is no longer emotionally invested in being seen. She has already learned how to survive without it. This is why reassurance comes too late, why sudden attention feels confusing instead of comforting, why gestures don't land the way they used to. Her system adapted to loneliness inside connection. And once adaptation happens, reversal is slow. Not impossible, but slow. Because the mind remembers where it learned to protect itself. And right now, it learned that protection was found not in closeness, but in emotional distance. And this is the truth most people never name. She doesn't feel lonely because she is ungrateful. She feels lonely because emotional presence was missing for too long. Loneliness inside a relationship is not the absence of people. It is the absence of felt understanding. It is what happens when her emotions keep showing up, but no one fully meets them, so her heart didn't break. It learned to be quiet. It didn't stop loving. It stopped leaning. And once a woman learns how to carry herself emotionally, without being held, she becomes stronger but also more distant. Not because she wants distance, but because her system learned that closeness was not a place of rest. If you recognize this pattern, don't rush to fix it with words. Presence repairs what explanations cannot. Consistency repairs what promises cannot. Being emotionally available without being asked repairs what reassurance never will. And if this spoke to you, listen till the very end of your own awareness. Because understanding this is not about relationships alone. It is about recognizing how silence forms inside the heart. If this helped you see something clearly, subscribe not for the algorithm, but because what we're building here is understanding that lasts. Take a breath, let the words settle, and remember, loneliness is not her weakness. It is a signal that something meaningful was missing.